Mr. President, a few years ago, an author named Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called The Tipping Point. And he really spelled out in the course of history when something occurs which changes people's thinking, actions. It is a precipitous moment where what has been done for so long stops, is reevaluated, and a different course is followed. The clear question we have in America today is whether we've reached a tipping point when it comes to gun violence. It's only been 13 days since the tragedy in Parkland, Florida. And look what's happened since. Of course, outrage, sadness, mourning for the families that lost these wonderful students, teachers, and administrators. But beyond that, these high school students, 17, 18 years old, some even younger, have really become a national voice, a powerful voice on the issue of gun safety in schools. I often wondered when this moment might occur or whether it would occur. There's been such a long litany and string of mass shootings, massacres. Sad to say, there was a numbness setting in when terrible things occurred in places like Las Vegas, in Texas, in other states. You wondered, is that the event? Is killing those innocent children at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut, will that be the tipping point? Will America finally say enough? It appears on this day, 13 days after the tragedy in Florida, that we are near or at a tipping point when it comes to gun safety. Some of it is very personal. 2 weeks ago, after this occurred, my 6-year-old granddaughter said to her mother that she'd been warned in her first grade classroom that if a shooter should turn up at the school firing a gun, first she should stay away from the windows, and second, she should lie down on the floor. I can't tell you what a profound impact that had on me as a grandfather, to think that my little first grader, this beautiful little girl, was worried about the moment when somebody would walk in her classroom and just wantonly try to kill the students and teachers who were there. I cannot believe that any sane person believes that the Second Amendment to the Constitution, the right to bear arms, envisioned that possibility. I'm sure it didn't. I'm sure our founding fathers, and we can debate it the rest of the day, what their words actually meant, never envisioned that an American citizen's right to bear arms could somehow translate into violence against so many innocent people as it has over and over and over again. Last week I was in Chicago. I was joined at a press conference by representatives at the Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center on the South Side. We stood together, victims of gun violence and myself, at a press conference. Advocates from HIDEA's Promise and the Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence, who've been working for years to combat the scourge of gun violence in Illinois. I stood with Patrick Corellis, who was wounded on February 14th, 10 years ago, in a mass school shooting at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, Illinois. But a new voice came to join us. A graduate of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Her name is Francine Brown. She graduated from Stoneman Douglas in 2009. She's currently a law student at Chicago-Kent College of Law. She's one of dozens of Stoneman Douglas graduates in the Chicago area, which include, incidentally, the first baseman for the Chicago Cubs, Anthony Rizzo. Hundreds, if not thousands, nationwide, who've joined together in the aftermath of the February 14th mass shooting that killed 14 Stoneman Douglas students and 3 staff. These young men and women have come together to speak up and urge their lawmakers to do something about the nation's epidemic of gun violence. The message is starting to resonate. When Francine Brown was speaking last Wednesday, students at schools across the Chicagoland area were walking out of class in solidarity with Stoneman Douglas students. They're all calling for common sense gun reform. These students don't have time or patience for political games in Washington or Springfield. They've seen their friends, kids just like themselves, get shot in the classrooms and neighborhoods. They've had enough. Francine Brown said, and I quote, "It's not supposed to matter what side of the aisle a politician sits. We're supposed to all protect the future for our children." I couldn't agree more. These students and young people across the country are changing the debate about gun violence. They're making it clear how absurd it is for lawmakers in this chamber, across the rotunda, or in state capitals to do nothing when Americans get shot every day in their homes, their neighborhoods, their churches, nightclubs, concerts, and schools. They're fed up with politicians in Washington who ignore the overwhelming majority of Americans who want common sense gun safety and who listen instead to paranoid, bullying gun sales lobbyists. Remember, the National Rifle Association and its allies oppose virtually anything that hurts gun sales. They fight against proposals that might reduce gun sales, and they try to roll back laws on the books that limit them. That is their agenda, but it's not America's agenda. Corporate America is starting to walk away from the NRA. It is no longer a source of pride that they are doing business with the National Rifle Association. Just the opposite. We are seeing company after company end relationships with the NRA because of its increasingly unhinged and hysterical rhetoric on the issue of gun safety. Corporate America, some of the biggest corporations in our nation, realize that the NRA no longer speaks for responsible gun owners. When will Congress realize this? We know we need to act to keep our children safe. There's no single reform that could stop every shooting. We know there are gaps in our gun laws that make it easy for criminals, abusers, troubled children, and mentally unstable people to get guns, even military-style assault weapons with bump stocks and high-capacity magazine clips. We need to close these gaps, and that requires the Republicans who control Congress to stand up to the NRA and do something that the NRA might not like. For starters, our Republican colleagues could take up legislation that the leader of their party, President Trump, proposed last Thursday. Here is one of the president's infamous tweets. I will be strongly pushing comprehensive background checks with an emphasis on mental health. Raise age to 21 and end sale of bump stocks. Congress is in a mood to finally do something on this issue, I hope, the president tweeted. I hope as well. There are proposals that Americans broadly support. Let's do something. Of course, the NRA is opposed to most of these. We expect it. They might have some negative impact on gun sales. But is the gun sales lobby now in charge of writing bills for the Senate and the House? Deferring to the NRA is the reason why we've reached this moment in history. Remember, the Senate has held one gun vote since President Trump came to office. And it was a vote to prevent mental health records from the Social Security Administration from going into the FBI's gun background check system. That's the only vote since the Trump administration took office. It's the only thing we've done. Roll back a law on the books on mental health and background checks. That was a giveaway to the gun lobby, which claims to support enforcing the laws on the books, but actually tries to roll back those laws if it means helping lift their sales. Let's show the students at Stoneman Douglas and across the country we hear them. I hope we show that reducing gun violence is a priority. I call on my Republican colleagues to join the Democrats in a bipartisan effort to treat the issue of gun safety with the same sense of urgency that the American people believe is necessary. If Republicans gave a fraction of the effort to gun safety that they have to other issues, we could get this done and done quickly. There are plenty of reforms we can pass that are completely consistent with the Second Amendment that would save lives. Even President Trump, for the time being, has said he supports them. So let's get started. Not a giveaway to the gun lobby. Let's work on closing loopholes. Let's have universal background checks. Over 90% of the American people believe we should keep guns out of the hands of convicted felons and mentally unstable people. I also believe that we should have those who are subject to protective orders for domestic violence should be disqualified from buying a gun. I would say that those who are on the terrorist watch list that we do not allow to fly on airplanes because of fear that they could do harm to others shouldn't be allowed to buy guns in the United States. I want to add a provision in there that straw purchasers, the girlfriends with no criminal record who buy the weapons to give to the boyfriends with a long criminal record ought to have the book thrown at them. I want to thank the victims and advocates who've worked for many years to help reduce this epidemic of gun violence. I want them to know that I stand with them. I hope that we can all stand with them on a bipartisan basis. Mr. President, I yield the floor.